5 days ago. That's how long it's been since I hosted the party that flipped my world upside down. Funny how everything before that feels muted now, like the dull hum of a distant fan. The memories from that night, though. They're loud, vivid, and sticky sweet, like molasses clinging to every corner of my mind. The doctors told me not to, warned me even. You need to heal, they said. No strenuous activity, no pushing your limits. But how could I explain that this wasn't about limits? It was about craving, a need to feel, to be felt. Healing could wait. It couldn't. It was a Saturday, spontaneous in the way only the most dangerous ideas are. Jake, my boyfriend, had always been the more cautious one, but even he had indulged my insistence. I told him it was time to stop talking, stop fantasizing, and just do. We'd dipped our toes in this world before, but it was always at someone else's house, under someone else's rules. This time the scene would belong to us. By 10 p.m. our place was transformed. Soft lighting cast golden hues across the walls, a faint haze of incense trailing lazily in the air. The playlist I'd curated thumped gently in the background, setting a rhythm that made my heart race. Every detail had been obsessively curated, down to the silk sheets draped over the furniture to create a sense of forbidden luxury. And then, as the first guests began to arrive, that initial flood of nerves gave way to something warmer, more electric. Glasses of champagne clinked in greeting. Laughter, flirtatious and teasing, spilled across the room like an unspoken promise. Familiar faces and some new, each pair of eyes alive with their own spark of curiosity or desire. By 10:30 I was already feeling it. Too much wine, too little inhibition. Jake had disappeared somewhere, likely caught in some easy conversation, leaving me momentarily alone. That's when it happened. I realized, with an embarrassing flush, that my body had betrayed me. The damp heat between my thighs had bled through my underwear, leaving me feeling raw, exposed. I slipped away to the bathroom to clean myself up, my fingers trembling as they pushed my damp underwear down. I left them there on the tiles, too caught up in the feverish whirl of my own mind to care. When I returned to the living room, I wasn't wearing anything beneath my dress, and that knowledge sent a secret thrill through me. I think I knew even then that the night wouldn't go as planned. It was too charged, too ripe with possibilities. And as the hours ticked by and the guests fell into a rhythm of whispered secrets and exploratory touches, I let go of every hesitation. The steam from the shower had barely cleared when I stepped into our bedroom, still damp and glowing from the rush of heat against my skin. My black dress clung to me, water droplets slipping off like whispers of a moment I wasn't ready to leave behind. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and I was met with a scene that felt lifted from a dream, or maybe a carefully curated movie I hadn't been cast in until now. Everyone was engaged. The soft murmurs, the occasional laughter, and the rhythmic rustling of sheets created an almost hypnotic soundtrack. There wasn't a single unoccupied man in sight. My heart thumped against my ribs, not with jealousy but with an aching kind of anticipation. It was a tableau of human connection, raw, uninhibited, and intoxicating. My gaze landed on Lisa, her familiar silhouette etched against the ambient glow of the candles. She was lying on her back, her expression serene, a soft smile curving her lips. I moved toward her, slipping onto the bed like I belonged there, and let my fingers trail over her pelvis, feather-light. The gesture was simple, exploratory, and met with a soft sigh of approval that made my pulse quicken. Started slow, exactly how I liked it. No rush, no pressure, just the delicious buildup of something inevitable. And then Brian walked in. He wasn't just a guy to me. He was Brian, my confidant, my partner in crime, my best friend in all the ways that mattered. Tonight, though, he was something more. The way his shirt clung to his frame, the sharp angle of his jaw catching the candlelight, it was almost unfair. He looked at me with a knowing grin, the kind that made my breath hitch, and in an instant, he was beside me, his hand warm against my skin. I closed my eyes and let myself drift, the sounds of the room swirling around me like a symphony. I could feel Brian's focus, his attention, his absolute commitment to the moment, and it was everything. The tension melted away, leaving only the high, pure and all-consuming. And then, it happened. I had only opened my eyes for a second, just long enough to catch a glimpse of Jake, my boyfriend, standing by the bed. He wasn't watching in anger or even confusion. He was participating. Except instead of what I expected, he made his presence known in the most unexpected way. A stream of warm, sticky mayonnaise landed square on my face, sliding with unrelenting precision right into my left eye. The burn was immediate, a fiery sting that ripped me out of my blissful haze and straight into panic mode. "Oh my God," I muttered, shoving myself off the bed as the stinging worsened. I barely heard the surprised murmurs or saw the awkward glances as I stumbled toward the bathroom. The cold water was a relief, sharp and shocking as I splashed it over my eye. My heart raced, not from the earlier exhilaration but from the sheer absurdity of the moment. Jake's voice was a distant hum of apologies outside the door, but I didn't have the bandwidth to process it. All I could think was, this has to be a sign. When I finally returned to the bedroom, the scene had shifted, though the energy lingered like a memory too sweet to fully let go. I hesitated at the doorway, the events replaying in my mind like a silent warning. Should I stay? Should I let myself fall back into the heady pull of the night, or should I step away, let it remain a fleeting, intoxicating dream? I did the only thing that made sense in the moment. I walked back in. I didn't lie down again, though. Something about that couch, and that moment, felt like it belonged in a story I shouldn't write twice. After rinsing my face and taming the sting in my eye, I stepped back into the bedroom. The air was thick with the remnants of warmth, movement, and muted laughter. Despite the earlier mishap, the pull of the couch, soft, inviting, and nestled in the center of it all, was irresistible. It was the only spot that felt like mine. I settled into the cushions, exhaling deeply as I let myself melt back into the rhythm of the room. This time, the process had already found its pace, faster than I typically liked, but surprisingly enjoyable in its urgency. I closed my eyes, letting the world around me blur into a kaleidoscope of sound and sensation. My mind wandered to moments of lightness. Sunsets on the beach, Jake's ridiculous laugh when he found a joke too good to keep to himself, and the crackling intimacy of nights spent chasing the high of connection. Funny thing about Jake, though. Even in this space, where the air felt electric with possibilities, he found ways to break the tension. His timing was impeccable, if not mildly exasperating. Between his moments of intensity, he peppered the room with absurd jokes. Something about mayonnaise jars and French fries, though I barely registered the punchline. His laughter was contagious, but I was too far gone, floating on the current of the moment to care much about his stand-up ambitions. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, or maybe it was the other way around. Time folded in on itself, and I was just there, existing, breathing, letting the room and its people carry me. And then Brian spoke. "Let's all four men play with each other," he suggested. His tone so casual it could have been a weather update. My eyes fluttered open, the sentence slicing through the haze like a sudden gust of wind. "What?" I thought, the word lingering in my head as I glanced around, catching glimpses of amused smirks and raised brows. Jake chuckled, half in jest, half in curiosity, while the others exchanged looks that teetered between intrigue and outright challenge. It wasn't even a full minute before the tone shifted, laughter giving way to movement as I found myself surrounded. The proximity of their bodies, the heat, the easy familiarity of their banter. It was overwhelming in a way that left me breathless but grounded, like diving headfirst into cold water. First we joked. Someone said something about this being a team-building exercise, which earned a round of laughter. But soon actions replaced words. The energy intensified, each gesture blending seamlessly into the next, the room crackling with an undercurrent of shared understanding. It wasn't all ease, though. Amid the pleasure was the sting of pressure, the sharp edge of being present in a way that demanded my full surrender. It was the duality of it that struck me, the sweetness of connection laced with a bite of discomfort, both parts inseparable and necessary. But for all the intensity, the first 10 minutes were pure magic. Each touch and movement hit like a note in a symphony I'd spent my whole life longing to hear. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. It wasn't just about the physical, though that was undeniable. It was about being seen, being wanted, being part of something larger than myself. The pleasure wasn't just in what was happening, it was in how it made me feel. Alive, whole, and utterly free. I was still lying on the couch, the energy around me growing sharper, faster, and harder to contain. The rhythm of the room had shifted again, like a song reaching its crescendo. At first, I welcomed the rush. It was exhilarating, an intoxicating whirl of sensations. But then came the sting, faint at first, barely a whisper of discomfort. I ignored it, convincing myself it was part of the thrill, part of the story I wanted to live out. A minute passed, maybe less, and then the faint sting grew into something sharper. Two men, eager, a little too much so, treated me like I was something elastic, pliable, invincible. Before I could register what was happening, I felt a jolt of raw, searing pain, like a boundary I didn't know I had been pushed too far. "Stop!" I screamed, my voice breaking through the haze of activity like a shard of glass. "Stop, stop, stop." Everything halted. The room fell silent, the weight of my voice cutting through the thick, heated air. I sat up, trembling, my breath shallow and ragged. That's when I saw it. Ketchup, more than I'd ever thought possible, streaked across me like a vivid, chaotic warning. My heart clenched as fear took hold, cold and suffocating. Everyone froze, their faces painted with concern, some with outright panic. I stumbled off the couch, clutching myself as if to hold together what I feared had come undone. The pain was real, hot, and unrelenting. I barely heard the murmurs of reassurance as I made my way to the bathroom, my legs shaky beneath me. The shower water hit my skin, cold at first, then warm, and I let it wash over me, rinsing away the streaks of ketchup and trying to soothe the deep ache that lingered. I pressed napkins against the source of the pain, whispering silent prayers for it to subside. It took 5 minutes, 5 long, agonizing minutes, before the pain dulled to something bearable. But when I glanced down, I saw it. A tear, small but glaringly obvious, right along the tender fillet of skin. My stomach churned, and for a moment I thought about walking away, about letting this be the end of the night. But then a strange calm settled over me. It didn't look good, no, but it wasn't unfixable. And perhaps foolishly I didn't care. I returned to the couch to find everyone still worried, their expressions a mix of guilt and apprehension. I held up a hand, forcing a smile that I wasn't sure reached my eyes. "Let's take it slow," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. We started again, this time with a new rhythm. Slower, more deliberate, each movement carefully measured. The pain didn't go away, not entirely. It lingered, sharp and insistent, but it was a different kind of pain now. It was balanced by something sweeter, something deeper that pulled me back into the moment. A pain I could work with, a pain that, strangely, I liked. By midnight, the party's energy had completely dissolved, leaving only an awkward quiet in its place. The earlier chaos, the tension, the laughter, it all felt like a distant memory now. One by one, people had slipped out, offering hurried goodbyes laced with concern. Jake and I were left alone, and I was trying to convince myself that the worst of the night was over. But Jake, he didn't share my optimism. When he finally took a good look at me, his expression shifted from mild worry to outright horror. "You need to go to the hospital right now," he said, his voice trembling. "Your tissues, they're torn. This looks crazy. Like you." I waved him off, rolling my eyes despite the sharp sting of pain. "I'll go tomorrow," I muttered, trying to suppress the exhaustion that pulled at me. Jake sighed, throwing his hands up in frustration, but he didn't argue further. "I used to smoke regular cigarettes, and I smoke very rarely, only in painful moments. I don't recommend it because it's very bad for you." That night I got high again before bed. I needed something to soften the edges of the discomfort, something to push the swirling thoughts in my mind far, far away. The couch felt cold and empty now, the earlier heat replaced by an uneasy chill. I drifted off eventually, though my sleep was shallow and restless. The next morning I was awake by 8 a.m., the ache in my body sharp enough to drag me out of bed. Jake refused to come with me to the hospital, saying he was too embarrassed to be seen there for something like this. His words stung, but I didn't have the energy to fight him on it. I went alone, sliding into the driver's seat with a mix of dread and resignation. The hospital smelled sterile, the harsh overhead lights making everything feel uncomfortably real. The nurse at the desk gave me a polite but knowing look as I explained my situation, and within minutes, I was seated on the examination table, waiting for the doctor. When he walked in, he took one look at me and shook his head, his lips curving into a wry smile. "What horse did you play with to end up like that?" he asked, his tone light but curious. It caught me off guard, and for a moment, I just stared at him before letting out a breathy laugh. "The kind that doesn't come with a warning label," I shot back. It wasn't much, but the humor lightened the tension in the room, if only for a second. The examination was thorough but not as humiliating as I'd feared. The doctor's professionalism was a relief, his focus steady and free of judgment. When he finished, he looked up at me with a mix of sympathy and sternness. "You'll need a few stitches," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "And no pressure on the area for 14 days. 14 days. I exclaimed, my voice rising an octave. "I can't live like that for 14 days. His expression softened, and he nodded. "I know it's inconvenient, but it's necessary if you want to heal properly. I'll also prescribe you an anesthetic ointment and a healing cream. Use them regularly." The stitching process was quick, the doctor's hands steady as he worked. I clenched my fists, focusing on the ceiling and counting the tiles to distract myself. When it was over, he handed me the prescriptions and a small tube of ointment. "You'll be fine," he said, offering a small smile. "Just take care of yourself." When I got home, the reality of the situation hit me like a wave. The stitches throbbed with a dull ache, and the idea of keeping still for 2 whole weeks felt like a punishment. I wanted to cry, to scream, to rage at the unfairness of it all, but instead I sank onto the couch, letting the silence wrap around me. I didn't cry. Not yet, anyway. 2 days. That's all I managed to last before I broke down. I had sworn, promised myself even, that I would stick to the doctor's orders, that I would rest, heal, and give my body the time it so desperately needed. But the truth is, habits are hard to break, and when you've built your routine around something that gives you a thrill, resisting feels like fighting gravity. At first, I convinced myself it wouldn't be that bad. Just a little, I thought. I'll be careful, I won't push too far. But within moments, the familiar sting came rushing back, sharp and immediate, a painful reminder that my body wasn't ready. It was both frustrating and oddly comforting, like I'd found a strange sort of reassurance in the pain, knowing it was my body's way of setting boundaries, even when I refused to. The doctor's words echoed in my mind. "It will never heal if you strain this area." That reality hit harder than the pain itself. It wasn't just about the discomfort. It was about the long-term consequences, about looking good, feeling good, and not carrying a permanent reminder of my impulsiveness. So, as much as it pained me, I decided to listen. From that moment on, I committed to the 14 days. No exceptions. I knew it wasn't just about me, it was about making sure I could look at myself in the mirror without regret, about proving to myself that I had enough self-control to prioritize my health over my cravings. And now, here I am, writing this story for you, hoping it does more than entertain. This isn't just a humorous tale about a wild night gone awry. It's a cautionary reminder that some thrills just aren't worth the aftermath. Trust me when I say, the lessons I learned weren't just about listening to my body. They were about knowing when to pause, when to reflect, and when to let go of the rush long enough to let yourself recover. So, if there's one takeaway from my experience, it's this. Don't push yourself beyond your limits, especially when your body is screaming for rest. And for heaven's sake, don't ignore medical advice just because the thrill of the moment feels impossible to resist. Take care of yourself, dear ones. Because believe me, there is nothing beautiful about stitches. So, I wrote this story for your information so that you never repeat it. It's a humorous story that should teach you a couple of lessons. I think you will learn them and not repeat after me. I do not recommend repeating everything said in this story. I love you all and take care of yourself.